All right, Broncos country. Hope you guys are having a wonderful day. Really excited to do this video. This was inspired by one of our recent commenters, Chris, on one of the videos. And yes, really appreciative of all the interaction that I've had with you guys. Thrilled that we're up to 75 subscribers. We're on our way to 100. That really means a lot. So please hit that like, subscribe if you like daily Broncos content, and let's get into the topic of today. Recently, I saw that Chris had a comment asking me about my thoughts on Colorado State tight end Dallin Holker, and could he potentially be the next tight end that the Broncos bring in? And I think that this is a wonderful topic. I wanted to expand it a little bit, Chris, and talk more about the overall approach that the Broncos could have with filling this big need that we have at the tight end position. You know, there's a lot to be desired right now. Of course, we all had higher hopes for Greg Dulcich, but he's had a tough time staying healthy, being on the field. I think it was Nate Jackson talking about this on DMAC's podcast recently about how dealing with those chronic hamstring injuries with Greg Dulcich, that they're actually working on changing his gait, the way that he runs. And I mean, that's never a good sign. I think with long-term hopes for Greg Dulcich. And so I wouldn't be surprised if you see a combination of free agency and draft with how Sean Payton and the Broncos approach dealing with the need at tight end that we have. So gonna break this out into kind of three different parts of the show today. First, I'm gonna show you where we stand from a salary cap perspective. We'll then go ahead and take a look at how we could approach filling this tight end need through free agency. And then probably the most exciting aspect of this is taking an approach in looking at how we can fill this need through the draft. Not only Holker, but there are some other prospects along with Brock Bowers that I would be very excited about to see Sean Payton, the Broncos, bring in. So let me go ahead and get started. I will share my screen and we'll get rolling. Again, guys, if you haven't used Spot Track to kind of mess around with the salary cap stuff, please do it. Really easy tool to use. Love it. But if you haven't seen me do this before, there is a path, even with this $35.4 million cap hit we'll have this year, most likely for Russell Wilson. There's a way in which we can create ample amount of cap space for us. We're not screwed. We're not in salary cap hell. Are we in a big salary cap inconvenience with this cap hit? No doubt. But this is something that we can get around. How do we do that? Hey, we restructure Zach Allen, Mike McGlinchey. Hopefully we can restructure Cortland Sutton and sign him to an extension. I would really like that, especially if we're going to have a young rookie quarterback in here, having a veteran receiver that he can trust. We'll cut Tim Patrick, saving almost $10 million, restructure Ben Powers, as well as Alex Singleton. And let's say we trade Jerry Jeudy. I think that's something that we all want done, whether it helps us move up to draft somebody like J.J. McCarthy or gives us, a third, fourth, fifth, sixth round pick, something like that. That would be wonderful. And Tremont Smith, we could cut him, saving, a couple $1 million and some change, and right now we're looking at $26 million. So that gives us some room if we want to, sign a center, for instance, for around $7 million. If we want to bring in a free agent tight end, we can do that. Bring in a bargain wide receiver. I think we can do that. And there's more things that we can do to create space, like Damari Mathis we can cut. I'm going to butcher his name, but the defensive end that we drafted last year that was suspended all year for betting on games. He's already 26 with barely any experience. So, I mean, we could get up to well over $30 million in cap space if we wanted to. And those are just, 10 moves that we could do. We're not even talking about, do we want to move off of Garrett Bowles or Justin Simmons, for instance? Say we trade both of those guys, even with that Russell Wilson cap hit, I mean, we're up to $60 million in cap space if we want to approach it that way. I'd prefer to hold on to both of those guys, but just for showing you guys how easy it is for us to create space to sign some guys. We can do that. Now, let's get back to the main topic here of what do we do with the tight end position. I think, regardless of how much space we have, I would love to see Adam Troutman brought back. I think that he's a solid depth tight end. I think the Let's Talk Bronco guys who those Zach Seegers and Joey Richards, they're talking about that yesterday, how they'd like to see him back on the team as well. I agree, but I don't think we can have him as our starting tight end. But let's go ahead and get into taking a look at some of the expected free agents at the tight end position coming up this next month in March. And there's some really interesting tight ends that I think, granted the amount of cap space that we have, I think we could go after some of the top tight ends available in this year's free agency class. And Hunter Henry obviously has been a kind of a disappointment since he's been with New England. I think most of that has to do with the fact that offense overall has just been terrible. They've had awful quarterback play, awful coaching, throughout the last few years, but he's still a tight end that's under 30. You see right now he's 29 years old. I don't think he'll be making anywhere close to that $12 million range this next year. I think you could sign him for somewhere between probably $3 to $8 million or so, just because he has not been, that productive. 6 touchdowns, though. He's going to be a red zone threat. Somebody that, again, we saw how good he was in San Diego / LA. I forget when they moved to LA, but with the Chargers, obviously he was a very productive player. And depending on the price, I would love to go after Hunter Henry. I think that he is probably similar to that type of player that we were hoping Greg Dulcich would have become. But he's not. And honestly, I wouldn't be too disappointed if we were to just flat out cut Greg Dulcich and save, a couple $1 million doing that, just because we can't rely on him to be healthy. Dalton Schultz, great year with the Texans this year. 635 yards, 5 touchdowns, commanded 739 snaps. I think he had close to 100 targets this year offhand, but you can see, had a really great yards per reception here, almost 11 yards per reception. I would imagine Houston re-signs him because, you want your young quarterback and CJ Stroud to have all the receiving weapons as possible. And it seems like him and CJ Stroud had a good rapport this year, but Dalton Schultz, maybe not the most explosive tight end or explosive athlete when it comes to being compared to other guys that are available, such as Hunter Henry or Gerald Everett. But obviously, is a good route runner, understands how to get open, how to read defenses, all of that. Maybe lacks a little bit in the blocking game compared to some of these other guys. But again, this offense needs juice. We need guys that can stretch the field, that can command attention from a defense with their coverage. And I would love to have Dalton Schultz on the team. Now, Gerald Everett is probably a guy I think that we could get for, cheaper compared to Hunter Henry or Dalton Schultz. Again, when he was involved in the offense in LA with Justin Herbert, I feel like he's had some really good games. 3 touchdowns this past year, almost 600 yards, 51 receptions. 411 yards, 568 snaps. Productive player. And again, I think that any of these 3 guys that I mentioned are better than anybody that we had on the roster this past year. And I would see as an upgrade. Mike Gesicki is an interesting guy. I probably want to stay away from him just because he's more so just a big slot receiver. Really struggles in the blocking game. I don't think Sean Payton would like that. Not very productive with the Patriots. And not kind of that well-rounded type of tight end that we've seen. I guess you could say, well, Jimmy Graham, wasn't the best blocker, but I would say that Mike Gesicki is definitely a tier 2 below when it comes to his blocking ability compared to somebody like Jimmy Graham. Now, this might be a little bit controversial, but I wouldn't be opposed seeing Noah Fant sign back here. I still think he's a better athlete at the tight end position than anyone else that we got on the roster right now. And I think that we've seen some improvement from him with certain games, I guess, during his time in Seattle. I think that helps when you had just better offensive structure there than what he had to deal with here in Denver, as well as, I mean, the whole training staff, everything like that. We know that during his time here in Denver, everybody had a hard time staying healthy, but I think he did a better job, if I remember offhand, staying healthy, staying available the past 2 seasons, and still a very young tight end, 26 years old. Usually tight ends don't kind of hit their stride till a little bit later in their career compared to somebody like a running back or a wide receiver, right? That kind of start out the gate a little bit more hot. But I would like to see Noah Fant here. Again, I feel like he's a well-rounded tight end, maybe not the most physically dominant. You'd always wish that he was a little bit more physical for his size. I was always making jokes when he was here about, I've never seen a tight end that big just go down on first contact as often as he did. But I remember seeing some games from him this year in Seattle where he had some big time highlight plays. And so that playmaking ability is still there. Maybe it's taking somebody like Sean Payton to unlock that. But guys, out of all the free agent tight ends here, I mean, average the most yards per reception at 12.9, 32 targets. You'd like to see him available or like featured more, but with not having as big as a role, I think he'll come cheaper. You can definitely get him signed for under $5 million, no doubt. And lastly, one of the other guys that I'm kind of interested in is Austin Hooper. Not very productive this past year in Las Vegas, but we've seen him productive in the past with the Falcons and the Browns. And I guess we could throw Robert Tonyan in there as well. He was a guy that was very productive in Green Bay, didn't really do much with Chicago this year, but all these guys are definitely kind of this tier: Robert Tonyan, Austin Hooper, Noah Fant, Gerald Everett. I feel like all of those guys, more so kind of seen as like second tier tight ends, I think could be a good bang for the buck, so to speak. But I mean, I wouldn't hate it if, depending on the deal, if we were able to go get one of those top tight ends and Hunter Henry and Dalton Schultz, and even if we draft a guy on day 2 or 3 at the tight end position, allowing them to come in and develop, not putting too much responsibility and expectation on them for their rookie year, that could be really interesting. So let's go ahead and transition over to who might be available for us to target in the draft. So this is Pro Football Focus's big board. I have it here at the tight end position here. And there are a lot of guys in this class, or a handful rather, that I really am excited about, that I think are definitely above average athletes. And I would be thrilled if we could have a vertical threat, someone who can be featured as a receiver in the passing game from the tight end position. I think Sean Payton wants that. I don't think he has it right now. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see a dual approach. So let's get to it. Brock Bowers, if he's available there at 12, I've done a video on him already. You have to highly consider just taking him there. Now you could say, hey, that's not great positional value. I think Brock Bowers is somebody that should be featured in your offense to the likes of, Travis Kelce, for instance, or Mark Andrews with the Baltimore Ravens, right? We could talk about the Detroit Lions rookie tight end. His name is escaping me right now, but that type of feature. So I wouldn't even see that as, hey, you don't draft a tight end that high, it's always a waste. I disagree when it comes to a game-changing athlete at that position like Brock Bowers. Now, Jatavian Sanders is a little bit maybe less polished, a little bit less proven, but I mean, if you've seen him before, absolute tank, 6'4", 243, basically the same size as Brock Bowers. Maybe doesn't necessarily have that same speed that Brock Bowers has, but definitely an above average athlete for the position at the NFL level. And right now projected to be a second round pick. So The only way I can see us attaining him is through a trade back to where we're getting a second round pick, or hey, if Sean Payton and George Payton pull off a miracle where we're able to get a second round pick for one of the guys that we've talked about, that might be one of the trade slash cap casualties for the Broncos, such as Garrett Bowles or Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Justin Simmons, all those guys. So I feel like that's kind of out of the equation a little bit, but Jatavian Sanders would be somebody that if it works out to where we could get him, I would be thrilled, absolutely thrilled to have him here. Cade Stover and Ben Sinnott, these are other guys that I feel like would be good to draft at, on day 3, for instance, have them develop as a tight end to right behind, one of those free agent signings, kind of as a stopgap. These guys are good receivers, have great size, can block as well. And yeah, they kind of profile as those do-it-all tight ends, but might need a little bit of seasoning. But let's get to the guy that I have here in the thumbnail that Chris asked about, Dallin Holker. I would be thrilled to have him here. 6'5", 235 pounds, great size, and could definitely be used as a vertical threat for the Broncos. Very productive at Colorado State. You see this past year, 64 receptions on 105 targets, guys. Averaged 12 yards a reception, had 6 touchdowns. That's phenomenal stuff. I think that would be great. I also love it when the Broncos bring in guys that are from schools in the state, whether that be CU or CSU, or I guess Air Force. I'm trying to remember if we've brought in any Air Force guys lately, but we have in the past, which is cool. But you see, hey, he can line up in the slot, 267 snaps in the slot, 142 in line. I think that, I could do like a little film review or walk through some of the highlights with him, but I think that he's a really good athlete as well. And definitely with like the 4th, 5th round, I would love for the Broncos to focus their attention on addressing the tight end. And I think Dallin Holker should be one of those main targets early day 3. I would absolutely love it. There's some other guys here. Tanner McLaughlin could be a really interesting guy that's taken in the 6th or 7th round. That, again, has great size, 6'5", 240. Pretty productive at Arizona this past year, if I remember correctly. Or I might be thinking of McMillan. But I think he had a touchdown or 2 against my Buffs this past year. But, yeah, you could see 530 yards, 55 targets, caught 45 of those targets. Yeah. Doesn't run downfield a ton, but, that's okay. And Jared Wiley is another guy that, just from his size, I would be really interested in using a 7th round pick if we can attain one on a tight end like Jared Wiley. He might even go undrafted, but you can't ignore 6'7", 260, right? And he can get downfield. We'll see what he runs in the 40 at his pro day or if he's at the combine, but very productive for the Horned Frogs, has 12 career touchdowns or 14 career touchdowns for them, 8 coming this past year. And of course he torched my Buffaloes as well. So yeah, overall, I think that this is a position that you will see Sean Payton focus on. This clearly is a big time position of need. Yes, we have Chris Manhertz who can block, but not necessarily a threat at all in the passing game. Adam Troutman, let's bring back for some depth and probably move on from Greg Dulcich. Bring in a nice little free agent signing, depending on how much cap space we're able to devote towards the tight end position. And then draft a guy, ideally and realistically, probably on day 3 that we can develop. Hopefully it's early day 3 so that they're kind of an above average athlete for the class. And we can see them develop into that tight end one there in the future. So thank you guys for tuning in. This was a lot of fun to do. I think I did get one comment. Jay, thanks so much. I'll answer this. Yeah, I think to get JJ, the Broncos would need to move up a bit to trade down to get more picks and land Rattler, but I honestly believe that JJ is the number 2 pick in the draft. Man, yes, it seems like JJ is definitely climbing up the draft board, and yeah, if the Broncos are going to go get him, I think Cecil Lammey was talking about this yesterday with Andrew Mason about how, yeah, they might need to move up to, pick 6, 7, 8 to go get him. And that's where I'm wondering, hey, does a Jerry Jeudy trade chip come in handy there? And maybe it's not the only thing that you have to trade to move up there. I'm not entirely sure, but Jerry Jeudy, I think he's going to be due around $13 million or just under that this next year, if I remember correctly. But that's kind of seen as a bargain with the wide receiver market right now, where those top wide receivers in free agency, they're looking for 18, 19, $20 million. The elite ones want close to $30 million now, right? So maybe there's a team in the top 10 that sees Jerry Jeudy of like, hey, you know what? We'll trade back. We'll take another future pick and Jerry Jeudy, take a chance on a guy who's affordable and kind of coming there on a prove it deal for a contract extension, right? And maybe a change of scenery would suit him and another team really well. I think, again, coming here with Denver, where we've had a lot of great wide receivers come through here, and with that draft capital, we had that expectation that he was going to be that alpha for us at some point, but just doesn't seem to have the consistency to get there yet. And maybe if he's able to kind of shed that expectation a little bit, go to another team and kind of start over, you could see him become a dependable number 2 wide receiver. And I think at $12 million or whatever it is, that's a great deal. That is a phenomenal deal. So, yeah, I do wonder if we would need to trade Jerry Jeudy and like a future 3rd round pick or something like that to move up. That's a great question. I am like becoming more and more excited about the idea of JJ McCarthy. I think the biggest thing that I'm excited about is having, Sean Payton plant his flag on one of these quarterbacks. I mean, that would be the most ideal. If it is Drake May, if it is Jane Daniels, Caleb Williams, go up and make it happen. But I just don't see that as a realistic possibility. So JJ McCarthy, the one guy that I'm really having a hard time getting behind, and maybe when I dive a little bit more into him later on, I'll understand the hype behind him a little bit more, is Bo Nix. I just don't understand it. I'm fine with, depending on where we draft these guys, getting pumped for him, whether that's JJ McCarthy, Spencer Rattler, Michael Pratt, right? Like all those guys. But it's just hard for me to see the Bo Nix stuff right now. I don't get it. I don't understand why he's a late 1st round pick, yet Michael Pratt and Spencer Rattler aren't that. I'm pretty sure if you put Michael Pratt or Spencer Rattler in that Oregon offense, they put up those numbers too. Like that's kind of how I see it. So yeah, really interesting. It's going to be so much fun to watch and see what happens with how the Broncos approach this thing this year, because there's a lot of interesting quarterbacks. None of them are perfect, but there's a lot of discussion on, hey, how high is this guy's ceiling? It seems like there's a lot of debate over that, and that's what makes it exciting. So overall, regardless of who we bring in, whether that is JJ McCarthy or a veteran quarterback like Jacoby Brissett, Joey Richards was bringing up yesterday on his show, I want to see this offense get some juice to it, have some weapons, not only at the tight end position, getting some more blood in there at the wide receiver position, as well as, I wouldn't hate it, bringing in a running back with some explosiveness like Marshawn Lloyd from USC or Bucky Irving from Oregon. I'd like to see our running back room with a little bit more juice. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. This really means a lot. If you like this stuff, please consider subscribing and supporting me on my way to 100 subscribers. It really means a lot. Hit that like too. Help spread this out to other Broncos fans. And if you like college football, support David Talks Buffs. We're on our way to 7,000 subscribers. So links are in the description for following over there. Really appreciate it, guys. As always, go Broncos.